looking at here is the summary table, the final cleaned up summary table from the workbook 2ADT_DOE, which stands for Design of Experiment again. This is information drawn from a pivot table, and the pivot table itself had been summarizing calculations, simulated calculations from a data table. The cleaned up form allows us to say what differences might exist when we compare combinations of a couple of items we might not have clarity on at the moment. For example, average revenue growth could be 10%, 15%, 20%, etc. Average expense growth could be any one of these. And what this table is allowing us to do is compare each of these combinatorial cases along a couple of performance measures that might be meaningful to us. Now, from this page, we can hit F9 and recalculate the data table. But as we know, F9 as a shortcut will not affect the pivot table. The only way we can update the pivot table to reflect changes in the data table would be either going back to the pivot table and refreshing it there, or going back up to Data, Refresh All, and doing it from here. And we can do that. That's not a big issue. We can also create a shortcut key, much the same way we did in the previous macro recording we demonstrated, where we could simply hit a control key and that keyboard command would refresh everything for us as well. But beyond that, keep in mind that even a summary of large sets of numbers generated in a data table and summarized by a pivot table is probably going to be subject to some kind of variation. I'll demonstrate that. The numbers here are not fixed. They're summaries of a simulation, a larger simulation, but nevertheless subject to variation. If I go up to Data and Refresh All, the data table refreshes, the pivot table refreshes, and all the summaries that we see get refreshed as well. That is, they are subject to variation. Even summaries are subject to variation. So, how do we know that the summary we're looking at right here is a valid one to use in a business case argument of some sort? What we could do is generate multiple versions of this table, multiple simulated summaries, so to speak, and see whether or not there's a great deal of variation, meaningful variation, across the summaries. If there isn't, then that's good. We can use any one of the summaries to get our point across. If there is, then we have a problem. But we're probably going to want to go back to that data table and generate more simulations, or go back to our underlying assumptions here and figure out why things are varying so wildly. Well, in order to even make that assessment, we need to do some kind of a comparison. And one way we can do that is by perhaps copying what we have here and pasting it as a fixed item in this workbook for comparison. Now, this is not as simple as you might think. If I simply copied this area and pasted it, what I would be pasting would be formulas, calculations, not actual numbers. And I don't want that. But if I go up to Paste Special and I paste this content somewhere down here, well, that's not going to work either, because I'm going to get an unformatted set of information. I'll do that right now. Home, let's do copy, and then let's select an area down here to paste that. Paste values, and suddenly we lose all of the meaning that formatting provided for us earlier. So it's very hard to read in comparison to this version. What we could do is go back to the home and press paste special formats, but already now we have a two-step process, and if we want to throw in the ability to update all of this using a data refresh, well, that's yet a third step. If we want to move all this content aside by, say, inserting rows so that we can paste another table for comparison. That's yet another step. So all these steps are kind of tedious if you want to be doing this repeatedly. Of course, there is a better way for doing this, and macros come to the rescue here as well. I'm about to write a somewhat more complicated macro. Not write it, of course, but simply record it. And here's how I'm going to start. First, I'm going to start by inserting some rows and making some space for myself. So, developer, record macro. Let's use that old shortcut T as a designation. Let's first insert some rows. Now let's go up to data refresh, and of course that's only going to update this table because it's live. The one below is fixed. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it. The values, and then I'm going to go back and paste special the format. And that's all I'm going to be doing. And if I hit Control T, I'll get yet another iteration of this table. I'll scroll down to show you what I have so far. I now have one table's summaries fixed, another one, different numbers, but more or less showing me the same picture here of what's going on, and yet a third, the original one that I had made. So just to reiterate, this is a cleared version of that spreadsheet. I'll pick a spot here for doing the pasting, and if I press Control T, I've recalculated that data table, the summaries through the pivot table, and the, of course, better presented table gets updated as well. That's being copied and pasted in terms of both the content, the numbers, and the formatting. And I can do that repeatedly. Control T, and I have a variety of alternative summaries, which in this case don't differ that greatly. If I have any concern over differences, again, that would be a key note for me to return to my work and figure out what's going on wrong. Again, Control T, much easier than having to manually go through all 4 steps. Here I've essentially copied it 3 times, so I've reduced a 12-step activity into 3 hits of a Control key on my keyboard. Easy, convenient, faster.